The Artemis IV drifted in the endless void, engines silent. Its hull bathed in the dim glow of distant quasars. Captain Alara Miles stood on the quarterdeck, fingers brushing the polished steel of the handrail, eyes locked on the view screen. Beyond the fractal maelstrom of the Vesper Rift, nothing stirred, no familiar stars, no cosmic dust lanes, only a yawning blackness that swallowed even their own exhaust plume. "How long until the next anomaly reading?" Alara asked, voice soft but carrying easily through the hushed control room. Lieutenant Jiro Tanaka, strapped into the pilot's chair, thumbed a sequence of commands. 30 minutes, Captain. But the fields are erratic, flux intensities spike every few seconds. I can't guarantee stable readings for more than a couple of minutes at a time, noted. Alara turned, her boots clicking on the grated deck plates. Dr. Khatri, Solene, gather in the lab bay. We'll begin sample analysis once Jiro stabilizes the bridge. Dr. Ishin Khatri peeked round the lab's reinforced door, eyes bright behind round spectacles. "We'll be ready, Captain. I've run the preliminary scans on the micrometeoric particles we collected yesterday. Their isotopic signatures, they're unlike anything I've ever seen. Good." Alara replied, offering him a small smile. "Let's find out what secrets this rift is hiding." 2 days earlier, the Artemis IV had departed from Callisto Station under a sky crisscrossed with shuttle trails, and the fiery plumes of launchers bound for Mars and Titan. The rift lay thousands of light hours beyond the periphery of charted space where cosmic surveyors dared not linger. Yet news of unexplained gravitational distortions and a faint, repeating radio signal had ignited a spark of desperation in Earth Command. If something beyond the rift could warp spacetime, harnessing that power might be the key to solving humanity's dwindling energy crisis. Alara had volunteered without hesitation, a career cut short by a scandal and ill-timed data leak that cost her command of a frontline frigate she'd been itching for redemption. The Artemis IV's mission: cross the rift, gather any data, and return. The odds of surviving the passage were slim, the odds of returning with anything meaningful slimmer yet. But Alara thrived on impossible. In the lab bay, Solene Dupre hovered over the centrifuge, adjusting the clamps on the containment vials. "I've isolated the crystalline residue from the meteorite fragments," she said, voice crackling over the comm. "Preliminary elemental analysis shows an alloy of magnesium, iridium, and, well, something else. An element I can't identify with our onboard spectrometer." Ishin nodded, peering at his holoscreen. "Radiometric dating suggests these particles are over 10 million years old. If they originated from within the rift, it means whatever processor civilization created them predates every known star system. In this sector, that aligns with the radio transmissions," Solene added. "They're structured, repeating in a pattern, almost like a beacon, but they're in a frequency band we haven't allocated to any human or known alien technology." Alara joined them, crossing her arms. "So we have anomalous metals, an ancient timestamp, and a signal, all pointing to something or someone beyond our comprehension." She tapped a control to bring up Jiro's latest stability report. "Jiro says we've got a narrow window of stable subspace to cross. You'd got everything ready?" They exchanged determined looks. "We're prepped," Ishin said. "Time to find out," Alara said, her voice steeled. The shuttle bay doors opened with a pneumatic hiss, revealing the rift's swirling face like an unblinking eye. The shuttle, a reinforced composite pod with extra shielding and thruster pods, hung, poised on magnetic locks. Inside, the three of them took their seats, Alara in the command harness, Jiro manning the controls, and Ishin monitoring instrumentation. "Here goes nothing," Jiro muttered, engaging the thrusters. The shuttle lurched forward, streaking into the rift's event horizon. For a moment, everything went white, instruments overloaded, external cameras blinded by static. Then, abruptly, the lights returned. They'd crossed into a region of utter darkness. The shuttle's windows showed nothing but an inky void, devoid of light, distant points of illumination. Even the shuttle's own exhaust glow seemed to vanish almost instantly. Ishin frowned. "No stellar background. It's like we're inside a bubble of nothing." "Leave it to the rift to be theatrical," Solene quipped, voice tense. She flipped through readings, Gravitational eddies are unstable, but there's something anchoring them. I'm picking up structural resonances not from the shuttle, from out there. She gestured toward the forward sensor bay. Coordinates fixed. Let me do a quick sweep. Seconds ticked by, then Solene gasped. They're an echo. The shuttle's forward-hulled scanner beamed a pulse. In reply, a jagged silhouette flickered into view on the tactical display. A colossal structure, its form crystalline, spired, towering into the void like a sunken cathedral of ice. Hollow chambers glinted with inner luminescence, and long, collapsed corridors wound between columns of translucent polycrystal. Alara's fingertips ghosted over her seat arm. So someone or something built this. Her voice barely rose above a whisper. Ishan leaned forward. Rewriting my probabilities now. The signal, it's coming from that structure. And the pattern matches fragments we intercept low. Frequency pulses, repeating in prime number intervals. It's a distress beacon. A distress beacon from who? Jiro asked, voice tight. Alara exhaled. Only one way to find out. She keyed her comm. Artemis 4, this is the shuttle. We've located the source. Prepare to establish a tether and begin data transfer. Back on the Artemis 4. Monitor screens flickered as data streamed in. Gigabytes of crystalline lattice scans, spectral analyses, and garbled holographic files. Scientists in the operations center watched in awe and dread. Dr. Lu Wei, xenolinguistics specialist, adjusted her glasses as she decoded snippets of the holograms. Captain Miles, this appears to be a historical archive. The imagery shows 3 figures tall, slender, faceted skin, wearing what I presume are protective exosuits. They're recording something, perhaps a log. Alara interfaced her console with Lu's. On the main view screen, an alien figure gestured toward a map, the very same patterns that Ishan had seen. But then the hologram flickered, and the figures looked alarmed, pointing off-screen. Voices rising in alarm translated text scrawling beneath. They approach. Abandon all systems. Evacuate. The image shook violently before dissolving into static. A collective breath filled the bridge. They were trying to leave, Ishan said. But they never made it. Or they left and abandoned. Solene began. Alara stared at the flickering archive. The rift may have been their refuge or their prison. She narrowed her eyes. What were they running from? And why? Was Earth on that star chart? Ishan tapped the console. Coordinates match a sector near our own solar entry point. They knew of us. Captain, and they sought something here. Silence. Then Alara spoke, calm but resolute. Earth command. We'll want answers. We've only just scratched the surface. Ready the shuttle for extraction, and hold position. We'll report in as soon as we've secured all data. As the shuttle disengaged and slipped back toward the Artemis 4, Alara gazed once more at the rift's swirling maw. Behind its turbulent veil lay the bones of a vanished empire and possibly the key to understanding both their fate and her own place in the cosmos. Sworn to uncover the truth, she whispered to the empty void, "Tell me your story before everything else is lost." Alara stood at the viewport of the Artemis IV's secondary observation deck, staring at the shuttle's faint exhaust trail as it disappeared back into the rift. The main view screen ahead displayed the crystalline ruins in high resolution, detailed jagged spires of translucent polycrystal, striated with veins of unknown metallic alloys that glowed faintly like dying stars. "Captain, I'm getting intermittent power surges from the shuttle's data uplink." Solene's voice crackled. Over the comm, "It looks like the archive files are fragmenting. We need to download what we can before the link collapses." Alara nodded. "Patch the shuttle's feed into our main node. Prioritize holographic logs and structural scans. Dr. Khatri, stand by to analyze as they come in." In the operations center, Ishan Khatri and Solene Dupre crouch over the neural mesh terminal, fingers dancing across holo keys. Lines of alien script scrolled through, transforming into rough translations. Coordinates, status reports, timestamps, and frantic pleas. A soft chime announced a successful transfer. Solene exhaled. "That's the last of it. The power conduit failed. Looks like a chain reaction." She tapped another readout. "The ruins core is unstable. Whatever kept this place intact is gone." Ishan leapt in. These timestamps, they span millennia. The archive began 10 million years ago, chronicling migration patterns, planetary surveys, diplomatic exchanges, even evidence of early contact with a world designated Solterra. That's us. Alara's pulse quickened, so they called Earth by that name, and they cataloged us, observed us, then something went terribly wrong. The shuttle docked with a soft thud. Jiro Tanaka emerged first, his normally steady features drawn tight. We saw movement down in the lower galleries, sub-frequency jolts almost like a heartbeat. Solene frowned. You mean the structure isn't completely dead? Not quite, Jiro confirmed. I've isolated the source. It's faint, but consistent, an energy signature pulsing deep beneath the main spire. Alara exchanged a glance with Solene. Lead the way, Jiro. But suit up, environmental seals and exoskeletal supports. We don't know what we'll find down there. Minutes later, the three of them stepped through the airlock into the shuttle's sensor-calibrated boots-on floor. Corridor, dim bioluminescent veins rippled along the walls, casting ghostly reflections in their helmet visors. The air, recycled through the shuttle's scrubbers, tasted faintly of ozone and something metallic like blood on the wind. According to my scans, Solene whispered, the core is about 4 kilometers that way. She tapped her wrist console, projecting a beacon that floated ahead, guiding them through arching corridors and collapsed tunnels. They emerged into a vast chamber at the heart of the ruin, a cyclopean vault whose ceiling soared out of sight. At its center floated a sphere of refracted light, suspended by filaments of crystalline cable. The sphere pulsed with a steady rhythm, each beat sending ripples of energy along the cables and through the chamber floor. Ishin's breath caught. What is that? A power nexus, Solene replied, stepping closer. An artificial star. If you will, designed to sustain the structure's systems, archive processors, and life support. She knelt to inspect a shattered panel at the base of one cable. But the reactors that fed it have degraded. It's running on fail-safe reserves. The sphere's light dimmed, then brightened in response to Solene's assessment. As if alive, a soft hum filled the chamber. Low and resonant, the sound vibrated their bones, stirring memories they hadn't known they shared. Alara took a cautious step forward. Let's see what else we can find. She raised her data pad and began scanning the chamber walls. Patterns emerged intricate, reliefs of crystalline beings ascending from darkness, reaching towards something beyond the vault. Look, Jiro said, pointing to a collapsed archway. Through the rubble, he glimpsed more corridors leading downward, deeper into the unknown. Ishin consulted his console. Biological signatures extremely faint. Could be residual organic matter trapped in the walls or survivors. Alara's heart pounded. No, too faint to be living. But there's something else. The archive logs mentioned a quarantine protocol, locked sequences labeled Project Exodus. Solene's eyes widened. Exodus, like leaving home. But where to, and why here? A tremor ran through the chamber. Dust and crystal shards rattled across the floor. The sphere's pulsing grew frantic, shadows dancing along the walls as the cables quivered. Jiro grabbed Alara's arm. We need to get out now. Before she could respond, the nexus emitted a shockwave of energy. The floor fissured, tendrils of light snaking out like reaching fingers. The trio retreated to a safe distance as several cables cracked and snapped, sending shards of crystal soaring like deadly projectiles. Solene scrambled to her feet. The nexus is collapsing. If it implodes, this whole structure could destabilize and collapse into the rift. Alara made a split-second decision. Backtrack to the shuttle. We've got all the data we can carry. They sprinted through the corridors, guided by Solene's beacon and Jiro's steady command of the path. Behind them, the ruin-grown spires, fracturing, corridors collapsing, light draining from the veins in the walls, bursting back into the shuttle bay. They sealed the hatch just as a thunderous roar echoed through the structure. The crystalline panels above them shuddered and crashed inward, sending a cascade of debris that rattled the hull. Once the door locked, Alara keyed her comm. Artemis 4, this is the shuttle. Nexus collapsing. We need immediate extraction. Copy. That, came Solene's voice from the bridge, taut with relief, maneuvering in to pull you out of the rift. As the shuttle engaged its thrusters, Alara risked a glance out the viewport. In the distance, the central spire fractured in a burst of light, trailing shards like comets before the entire ruin shuddered and disappeared into the rift's shifting horizon. Inside the shuttle, they sat in stunned silence. Dust and crystal powder coated their suits, and adrenaline still pounded in their veins. Alara exhaled, voice low and solemn. So they tried to save themselves, but the system meant to protect them failed. And now we know why they called for exodus. Because they were fleeing something worse than the rift itself. Ishin placed a hand on the armrest, eyes distant. What were they running from? Alara glanced at Jiro, who shook his head. Then she turned back to the viewport, where the rift's maw seemed to watch them in silent judgment. We'll find out, she said. But first, we go home. Earth Command will want every fragment of what we recovered. As the shuttle roared away, the rift's colors pulsed softly, an unspoken farewell. Or perhaps a warning. Some stories are meant to remain buried in silence. The Artemis IV emerged from the Vesper Rift like a ghost slipping through an unseen door. Outside its reinforced windows, familiar constellations snapped back into view, Sirius glimmering in the starboard aft. Betelgeuse hovering low on the port bow. Within the ship, however, the atmosphere was anything but routine. Every corridor thrummed with nervous energy as crew members prepared for transit jump, data upload, and inevitably debrief. Captain Alara Miles stood on the bridge, beside Celine Dupre, watching the sub-light drives spool up for the faster-than-light slip. Across the console, Dr. Ishin Khatri reviewed the last intact archive segments on his wrist-mounted holo display, face flickering with translated alien script and crystalline imagery. 10 gigabytes of raw holographic files, structural schematics, and cultural archives, Ishin said, his voice taut with excitement. The archive didn't just document their civilization, it charted their entire exodus plan. They called themselves the Terran, and they fled from a cosmic plague that consumed star systems at the light speed front of its advance. Alara frowned. A plague that moves at light speed. How did they hope to escape that? They didn't. Celine interjected, never taking her eyes off the drive status readout. Their stations were linked by subspace conduits. That crystal nexus we saw was part of a network designed to teleport them between safe stations. But the plague evolved faster than their network could adapt. Eventually, their evacuation corridors became death traps, which explains why their core reactor failed, Alara said. They sacrificed the nexus to seal the rift, hoping to buy time by trapping the plague beyond it. Ishin hesitated, running a finger along the holoscreen. There's one more sequence here marked with the symbol for final message. It's remarkably clear. Alara stepped forward. Play it. In the hushed bridge, the view screen crackled to life with an emerald-tinted holo projection. A lone figure, tall, lithe, features faceted like the crystalline architecture, stood before a triangular lectern inscribed with a language both alien and strangely beautiful. Its eyes glowed with quiet resolve. People of Terran. The figure intoned an accented galactic standard, courtesy of the Artemis IV's universal translator. If you are receiving this message, our station has fallen. We have sealed the rift behind us, sacrificing our network to contain the void-born plague. We send this archive to any who might come after, with a single plea: learn from our failure. Do not underestimate the darkness that feeds on the light of life. The figure paused, as though gathering strength. To Sol Terra's children we offer our legacy, our grief, and our hope. In our flight, we charted your world and admired your courage, your art, your infinite capacity for creation. We believed in your promise, even as the void-born consumed ours. May you rise above your own shadows, and may you never forget that sometimes the greatest threat lies not beyond the stars, but within our own untested ambitions. The projection wavered, then vanished, leaving a hush in its wake. Alara closed her eyes. Heart heavy, they knew of us. They reached out to warn us of a cosmic scourge that could annihilate entire civilizations. And they called us the children of Sol Terra, Ishin said softly. That implies respect, hope, but also responsibility. Celine pointed out, if the void-born plague exists, it could spread to our galaxy, to Earth. A distant klaxon cut through the silence. The jump drives were ready. Alara squared her shoulders, prepare for slip. Once we're clear of the rift's field, we broadcast everything, every word of their archive, every image of their civilization, every cautionary note about the plague. Aye, Captain, Jiro replied, his hands already closing the drive's housings. Moments later, the Artemis shuddered as its quantum coils engaged. Stars warped into swirling streaks, the vacuum of space bending around them. The voyage back to Sol system would take less than half an hour, but in that span, Alara knew, history would tumble forward at an impossible pace. Earth Command orbiting at Lagrange to aboard the dreadnought Aegis Prime was already alight with activity when the Artemis reported its arrival. War room. Consoles buzzed, transmission gateways flared to life, and the Council of Overseers assembled in a glass-walled chamber, overlooking the blue marble of Earth below. General Marisol Chen, head of strategic response, paced before the panoramic window, her uniform immaculate despite the tension in her shoulders. They claim a civilization 10 million years old, wiped out by a cosmic plague, one strong enough to trap them behind a rift barrier. And they made a final plea to Earth. Ambassador Rafael Ortiz rubbed his temple. We need to verify their data. The archive integrity is questionable, fragmented and corrupted in places. But if even half of it is accurate, then Earth is in mortal danger, said Dr. Elaine Masuku, chief xenobiologist for the United Terra Initiative. We must mobilize all our observatories to hunt for the void-born signature, any flare of infection. At subspace wavelengths, the President of the United Earth Federation, Lillian Cheng, raised a hand. And what of the political ramifications? If we declare a galaxy-wide plague, we sow panic. Entire star lanes could shut down. Colonies might revolt. We could spark an interstellar exodus. Alara's voice cut across the chamber as her holo avatar materialized on the center holodeck. Madam President, with respect, ignorance is not an option. The Terran archives include precise spatial coordinates of initial void-born outbreaks, nebulous, turned blood red with bioenergetic filaments. We must act before it reaches us. The room fell silent. President Cheng met Alara's gaze through the feed. Captain Miles, how can we trust your data? How do we know this plague isn't some artifact of rift-induced psychosis or sensor anomaly? Ishin's voice joined the projection. I ran isotope scans on residual particulates collected near the nexus, organic compounds not found in any known ecosystem. We isolated spores that germinate under ultraviolet light, producing luminescent mycelia identical to void-born descriptions in the logs. General Chen exhaled. So it's real. Then we have to prepare, Ambassador Ortiz said. Coordinate with the Martian Defense League, the Titan Research Collective. Every settlement along the Urt edge, set quarantine protocols, ramp up vaccine research, whatever we can do to fortify our defenses. President Cheng clasped her hands. Very well, we will declare a state of galactic emergency. Captain Miles, you will lead a task force to analyze these spores and work on countermeasures. Dr. Masuku, assemble your team. General Chen, prepare contingency fleets. As the holo session ended, Alara remained floating in the holodable's glow, her expression a mixture of relief and dread. Sol Terra would rally, but could they stand against a plague that devoured stars? Later, in the quiet of her quarters, aboard the Aegis Prime, Alara reviewed the Terran's final plea one more time. On the desk lay crystalline samples in containment pods, and a crystallographic scan of the Nexus matrix glowed softly on her data pad. She traced the luminous veins of the Nexus on the screen and remembered the hum that had resonated in her bones. They built wonders beyond our comprehension, she murmured, only to be undone by something they couldn't foresee. Her reflection stared back from the viewport, Earth's azure curve, rolling beneath her like a promise. Somewhere out there, perhaps beyond the rift or hidden deep in forgotten longitudes of space, the void-born plague waited, amorphous, relentless. Captain Miles knelt beside the sample pods and tapped the isolation seal. We'll honor your warning, she vowed. We'll learn from your exile and your sacrifice. We won't let your fate be our fate. And as Earth's blue horizons turned to the stars once more, Alara Miles knew the next chapter of humanity's story would be written not in triumph, but in desperate struggle against an enemy older than time itself. The Terran had entrusted their legacy to humankind. Now it was up to Earth to carry that torch, or watch its light be snuffed out by the encroaching darkness. The council chamber of the United Earth Federation thrummed with urgency. Holographic star charts hovered above the central table, pulsating with red markers, each a potential void-born outbreak. Around them, representatives from Mars, Titan, the Belt Colonies, and the Jovian Research Consortium conferred in low voices. Captain Alara Miles stood at the head of the table, her uniform crisp, eyes steely with purpose. Per the Terran archives, Alara began, voice echoing through the chamber's acoustic dampeners. The void-born plague advances along stellar nurseries and high-energy nebulae. Our scans have already detected early-stage bioenergetic filaments near the helix and omega sectors. If we do not act swiftly, it will breach the Cooper frontier within standard warp transit times roughly 3 Earth weeks. General Marisol Chen's holographic avatar flickered beside Alara. Our quarantine protocols are in place, but it's not enough to contain a light-speed pathogen. We need an active defense containment fleets, early warning buoys, and an accelerated vaccine program. Across from them, Dr. Elaine Masuku tapped a floating datapad. The spore samples we retrieved show promising antigen markers. My team is synthesizing a trivalent immunogel that could neutralize void-born cells at the molecular level. But to test its efficacy, we need live-though-contained exposures. That means building biosecure test stations near the rift itself. A murmur rippled through the delegates. Titan's envoy, Ambassador Lassair Orm, raised a slender hand. Are we prepared to send personnel back into the rift's maw? The Artemis IV returned with samples, but that passage nearly destroyed the ship. Our fleets are untested in that environment. Alara met his gaze evenly. I propose assembling a multinational task force project Exodus in honor of the Terran's legacy. We will combine Earth's finest engineers, xenobiologists, and fleet commanders to design rift-capable vessels, deploy orbital labs, and if necessary establish forward operating bases on newly discovered stable zones beyond the rift horizon. Jiro Tanaka stood, holographic schematics of a reinforced exploration corvette rotating in his hand. I've been upgrading the Artemis IV's sister ship, the Daedalus, with rift phase shielding and adaptive subspace thrusters. We can modify it for atmospheric insertion and long-range data relay. He tapped the model, illuminating the reinforced polar hull sections and the experimental graviton dampers. With additional resources, we could have to mission-ready vessels in for standard weeks. Dr. Kotri leaned forward, excitement igniting his features. And once we have the immunogel's preliminary results, we can equip the Daedalus with automated inoculation pods. If the plague shows even a single sign of mutation, we can adapt the formula in real time using the ship's onboard nanolabs. From the back, a voice piped up. It was Admiral Vasquez of the Martian Defense League. Containment must be our top priority. We cannot risk an uncontrolled outbreak on any human world. I recommend deploying hardened quarantine grids at key warp gates. Allow only vetted traffic and seal sectors at the first sign of bioenergetic anomalies. Alara nodded, agreed, simultaneously. We'll launch particle beacon flares, subspace sensors tuned to void-born spectral signatures along the outer arm. They'll give us an early warning window of at least 70 to standard hours before an outbreak reaches a monitored system. President Lillian Cheng spoke at last, her tone measured. Then it is settled. Project Exodus is greenlit. Captain Miles, you will oversee Phase 1, design and deployment. Dr. Masuku, you and your research team take Phase 2, immunogel trials. General Chen and Admiral Vasquez, coordinate fleet maneuvers and quarantine enforcement. And Ambassador Ortiz will lead Phase 3, interplanetary diplomacy and civil defense. Time is short. Let's get to work. The Forge of Unity within 24 hours. Earth's industrial complex roared to life. In the lunar shipyards of Tranquility Base, shipwrights molded graviton dampers and plasma hulls for the new Daedalus-class exploration. Corvettes. In the orbital labs of the Titan Research Collective, bioreactors churned amber-hued cultures of void-born spores, each one destined to die in the search for a cure. On Mars, engineers welded quarantine pods and testing chambers, while civil governors prepared contingency plans for mass inoculations. Alara spent her days in the Exodus War Room, surrounded by holo interfaces and tactical overlays. Every briefing felt like a trial by fire, simulations of rift crossings, disaster response drills for biohazard breaches, negotiations with the Belt's Resource Consortium for rare isotopes essential to the immunogel. Yet every night, she returned to her quarters aboard the Aegis Prime and stared at the Earthrise visible through her viewport, remembering the Terran's final warning. One evening, as the rings of Saturn glinted through the viewport, so leaned up Ray. Joined her. "You look tired, Captain," Alara sighed. "I am. But I can't rest not when so much depends on us." She paused. "Do you ever wonder whether we're repeating the Terrans' mistakes? They built wonders, then fled or died because they couldn't adapt quickly enough." Celine leaned against the bulkhead. "We have something they didn't: cooperation. On a galactic scale, Earth, Mars, Titan, the Belt, they're all working together. Our mistakes won't be identical." Alara offered a rueful smile. "Let's hope you're right." Into the rift again for weeks later, under the triple suns of Callisto Orbital, the newly christened Daedalus stood ready. Captain Miles, dressed in her command uniform, watched as Jiro and Soline ran final checks of the adaptive thrusters. Dr. Masuku oversaw the sealing of inoculation pods, and Admiral Vasquez gave last-minute instructions to drone operators controlling the quarantine buoys. "Everything is nominal," Jiro reported, voice crackling over comms. "Phase 1 parameters within safe limits. Rift drive charging now to 23%, holding for sync." Alara nodded. "Phase 2 commence immunogel trials. Soline, initiate nanolaboratory calibration. Dr. Khatri, stand by for biological integrity tests." As the Daedalus slid through space above the rift's fluctuating horizon, the same maelstrom of colors and gravitational eddies greeted them. The reactor banks hummed with power, and the graviton dampers flickered against the rift's distortive waves. Seconds later, reality bent and stretched, then snapped back into view. The Daedalus emerged into the silent void beyond, flanked by a dance of quarantine drones and subspace sensors. Below them lay the fractured shards of the Terran Nexus, half buried in cosmic dust. "Beautiful," Soline whispered, tapping her visor controls to magnify the scene. "And haunting." Alara's jaw set. "Deploy beacon flares in Sector 4 Alpha, Jiro. Plot a course south toward the emergent power signature we picked up last time." On the lab console, Dr. Masuku initiated the first live administration of the immunogel to void-borne spores. Contained in a hermetic test chamber, a tense silence fell across the bridge as the spores glowed, then collapsed in on themselves in a cascade of light. "They're dying," Masuku breathed, relief and triumph mingling in her voice. "The antigen maps, it's working." Alara allowed herself a moment of satisfaction before turning back to the viewport. In the distance, another shard of the Nexus pulsed faintly, as if still alive. Beyond it, the rift swirled an invitation and a warning all at once. "Advance to the next coordinate," Alara ordered. "But maintain quarantine protocols. We're not out of the dark yet." A beacon for all word of Project Exodus initial success spread quickly through human space. Colonies broadcast messages of hope. Civil leaders pledged resources, and scientific communities rallied to the common cause. For the first time in centuries, humanity spoke not of borders or disputes, but of survival. Back on the Aegis Prime, Alara received a final report from President Chang. The immunogel had passed Phase 2 with 87% efficacy in controlled trials, and the quarantine grids held firm across the outer arm. The void-borne plague was not yet repelled, but it had been stalled and, importantly, it had been met with fire. She transmitted her response on the interplanetary network. "To all who stand together in the face of oblivion, the Terran entrusted their legacy to us. We have answered that trust with unity, courage, and innovation. The darkness beyond the rift still waits, and it will come, but we will be ready." As the message echoed across Earth, Mars, Titan, and beyond, a new chapter began, one not of abandonment, but of defiance. Humanity, once alone in the silent dark, had found its place not as passive observers, but as guardians of life itself. And though the horizon beyond the rift still shimmered with unknown peril, for the first time in eons its light felt like possibility, a dawn born of hope, resolve, and the unbreakable bond of a galaxy united.